This is Paul Glumaz, and I'm smiling at you because I care about you. I have to tell you that we're very close to a nuclear war. That's not why I'm smiling at you. Today is the 7th of January, and this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. It is quite likely that there will be, following the murder of Qassim Soulemani and the leading general of the Shiite militias in Iraq, followed today by an attack on 2 U.S. military bases in Iraq, that this is going to escalate to a nuclear war. Trump has been, and we don't know exactly how this occurred, has been trapped into a situation which he can't get out of. The only way this situation can be dealt with is for an emergency meeting of the 3 major powers: Russia, China, the U.S. Iraq must be given security guarantee. Iran must be given security guarantees and a comprehensive new security architecture has to be imposed on the region by the 3 major powers, and the vast economic development of the reconstruction of the destroyed countries has to begin. Anything short of that kind of emergency 3 powers, potentially 4 powers with India, meeting cannot override the process which has now been unleashed by a series of operations that were run inside of the United States and in the area to trigger this escalation and counter-escalation, which led to the assassination of Major General Qassim Soulemani, followed by what is now an open, in effect, declared war between the United States and Iran. You have to understand that this is a trap. Trump is now trapped, and unless you have something of the type that I just described, he is not getting out of the trap. It will escalate. And in the process of escalation, there is no possible way that the U.S. can either stay in the region. There's no possible way that the U.S. won't suffer major casualties. And there's no possible way that possibly the entire oil traffic from the Straits of Hormuz will be shut down. But the only option the United States has in defeating Iran, the only option the United States has in defeating Iran is a preemptive limited nuclear war. That is, Trump has to nuke Iran. You have to understand that. That's where this is going. If he doesn't nuke Iran, then the U.S. loses face, because they cannot handle Iran's asymmetric warfare capability, of which General Soleimani was a major architect of over the last, shall we say, 30 years, roughly 30 years. He's been a major architect of the citizens' militia and the asymmetric. So what I'm going to try to do now is give you a sense of of how this developed in the Middle East, but then also give you a sense of the counter operation going on in the U.S. The British ambassador Kim Darroch, cables were leaked some time ago, and the British primary plan, as he laid out, was to induce Trump to attack Iran. That was where the weak spot was, and that's where that was their primary objective. To achieve that objective, or helping to achieve that objective, was the impeachment process, which was designed to essentially corner Trump into a situation where he had to rely on these Republican senators who wanted to go to war with Iraq. These are senators like Lindsey Graham and others. This is the John Bolton crowd. The plan to kill Soleimani as a trigger for war had already been discussed for many, many months prior, okay, as a way of dealing with the situation which was developing in Iran and in Iraq. Now you have to understand that the new president of Iraq, coming out of the elections, the former oil minister, al-Mahdi, he was trying to unify the country. He was trying to get the Shia militias under a national army system, so you had an actual nation that could control its own army. And at the same time, he was signing a memorandum of understanding with the Chinese to develop Iraq on a massive scale in exchange for the oil for technology. Okay, this is, otherwise Iraq is a destroyed country. Everything was destroyed during the war and subsequently what happened in this various civil wars that took place, ethnic wars, ISIS, all of that. The country is a destroyed country, but it has oil and it has a skilled population. So this is what Mahdi was trying to do. As soon as this happened, there were these massive young individuals, demonstrations, which then were fired upon by the Shia militias, which made it even worse. And then you had Mahdi resign. And so essentially the country was he's a caretaker, but the problem is that without a presidential system, you can't really function. So you have a situation where Iraq is kind of not really functioning, and you have these militias. So then, in this process, triggering this, Israeli began attacking these positions, to trigger a conflict. And then the U.S. started attacking these militias, and the militias started attacking contractors and so forth and so on. And so this thing escalated into the demonstration and occupation of the embassy, which was not, which could have been resolved without the murder of Soleimani. Now, who is Soleimani? You have to understand, he is, in effect, he was in effect the second most powerful person in Iran. He was essentially number 2 to Khamenei, and he was very close to Khamenei, the theocratic Ayatollah, head of Iran. So it was like the U.S. assassinating the number 2 person, the second most important person. And not only was he assassinated in this way with a drone, and not only was the deputy head of all of the militias, Shia militias in Iraq assassinated with him, but he was on his way, according to al-Mahdi, the prime minister. He was on a way that morning to meet with al-Mahdi, and he was carrying a message from the leadership of Iran to al-Mahdi, and he was going to receive a message from al-Mahdi from the Saudis. Al-Mahdi had been involved in creating a back channel between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which are essentially at war, on how to resolve the war, how to resolve the conflict. So this guy was killed at that moment, just before he was to meet with the prime minister of Iraq. Now, who is Soleimani? He helped organize Hezbollah in in Lebanon. Hezbollah withstood an occupation, a 36-day occupation, which destroyed southern Lebanon and were undefeated by the Israelis. How? Because he developed these guerrilla tactics, these tactics based on a very strong civilian militia-type organization. You have to understand that no one had ever seen these sort of formations develop. When Brzezinski back in the 70s and the British Bernard Lewis had planned the whole destruction of this region through these kind of wars, Shia versus Sunni, tribal warfare, throughout the whole area, and into the world, into China, into Russia, and this was the plan back in that was being put together in the 70s, and the Soviet Union was lured into Afghanistan. Then this created the mercenaries for later use, and then the British backed the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which brought Khomeini to power, and then in the process of the Shah being forced out, the entire military capability, because most of the officers fled, most of the military fled Iran. Iran had almost no military, and in that context, the West encouraged Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, because Saddam Hussein was fearful of the Islamic Revolution coming to the Shia population in Iraq, which were the majority, but they were the poorer part of the population. The government of Iraq was primarily Sunni, and the military is primarily Sunni. So they invaded, and Iraq had initially nothing to stop the invasion. The invasion came right in, and then what happened is the citizenry began to form into militias to fight Iraq's, and what proceeded was an 8-year war, which ended in a stalemate. Between the two sides, Iraq and Iran, over 1 million people probably perished. Over 5 to 600 billion in economic destruction in each country. So you had over $1 trillion of economic destruction between the two countries. And the West, the leadership of the United States at that time, the West was gloating over what a great thing had happened, that you had essentially pitted these two potentially powerful nations against each other to bring them to virtual destruction. This is evil. But that was what you had. So from 1980 to 88, the war went on. After the war, you had Desert Storm, and then you had the invasion of Iraq in 2003, where the country and its infrastructure and its government and its everything was destroyed, and most people who could left, most of the educated people who could left. And so this is the background to all of this. And then in the resulting chaos, the Shia militias began to become quasi-government because there was nothing else. They were the only ones, only organization that was established. And then the U.S. started attacking the Shia militias. This is, and out of this came out of the Sunni Iraqi element came ISIS, or part of ISIS. So all of this comes out of this whole process. And it's Soleimani who pioneered the techniques for fighting a much more powerful adversary, and all the mercenary armies that were sent in with hundreds of billions of dollars spent, $1 trillion spent off books. This is not money spent officially. This is money spent through the international slush funds of the drug trade and Al Yamama deal with the British, and all of this is money just funneled in. And then all of these mercenaries were then going to go to their home countries and cause problems. This was the new world disorder plan that was being implemented. And then the U.S. overthrew Gaddafi. As Hillary Clinton said, We came, we saw, he died, and she left. So Libya was destroyed. And then the armaments that Saddam Hussein had were shipped to Turkey to be shipped to ISIS and so on and so forth. All of this was exposed by Michael Flynn when he was Defense Intelligence head. And he went to Obama to explain the insanity of what the U.S. was doing. He got canned. And that's why he was gone after immediately after he became National Security Advisor, because he understood the situation. And he got set up. So then, so this is the context. So everything's been going, Iran is the enemy, Iran is the enemy, Bibi Netanyahu, Iran is the enemy, their nuclear program, this and this and this and this. So then the Saudis wanted to take control of Yemen. Again, the Houthis resisted, and they began using the same methods. And it's probably the case that Soleimani helped them out. The Iranians did help him out. And so, and now half of oil production of Saudi Arabia is down. And of course the Saudis were looking to, are trying to figure out a way to deal with Iran. Instead, you now have a war between Iran and the United States out in the open. The war is taking place. To kill this man in this way, in the context in which he was murdered, is a declaration of war. It's an informal declaration of war against the nation of Iran. And Iran has to retaliate, and it will retaliate, and it began retaliating today. And then I'm expecting Donald Trump to retaliate even hard, coming off the attacks on the 2 military bases. And from there, it's going to get very interesting. Because the U.S. cannot defeat Iran. The asymmetric advantages of Iran with the Shia militias and their capabilities and their electronic capabilities. One of the things that totally shocked the U.S. military was they went in to provoke Iran with a bomber, with a warplane, and hiding in the shadow was a stealth $160 million something drone which has a super AWACS capability, and they were expecting that this plane would draw fire and then the drone would be able to tell everything that was going on. Instead, the Iranians knocked out the drone, and that freaked out the U.S. military because they didn't know they had that capability. So that's the kind of thing that's going on. So at this moment, I can only say that people like Pompeo and Esper, and I don't know about, they are preparing to use nuclear weapons against Iran. That's the only thing I can think of. Because they wouldn't be doing this because it's a completely losing proposition. And this is also going to destroy Trump at the election. This war is not going to help him. Okay, it's not going to help him. Now, so the question is, how do we get to that place? Is this where Trump wanted to go? No, but he did have a weakness on Iran. Okay, but that's not where he wanted to go. But the impeachment process created a situation where now it's in the Senate, and they're playing, and the Republicans, the deep state Republicans, are now using this impeachment thing to put the pressure on Trump, and that's exactly what happened. So as Tucker Carlson has laid out, he's surrounded by the very people that tried to get rid of him, the intelligence community, the deep state, the CIA. Nothing's changed, and they pretty much got him in a trap. And the question is, can he break out of the trap? Well, he cannot break out of the trap on his own, unless there's an intervention to help him by Russia and China, and he agrees to that intervention to work with them on a comprehensive change in policy, a new paradigm. We're looking at nuclear war. Is that what the British would like? Yes. They would like to do it now. They wouldn't want to wait till after the whole financial system collapses and they don't have any power. And they don't want to wait until Russia's capabilities become much greater, which will neutralize a nuclear war. So that's basically what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a move towards nuclear war. And the question is, can we stop it? And we're not going to stop it by hysterically saying stop nuclear war. You have to use the forces that exist to bring to bear to get a comprehensive change. And the only thing I can say is that the imminence of nuclear war is the only thing that is going to force some people to have to make those fundamental changes. It's the thing that will force a change at the highest level, at a deeper level. Otherwise, it is going to be nuclear war. And I have to say that. I might get in trouble for saying that. I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything, but this situation is heading towards nuclear war. And only a dramatic shift to a new paradigm is going to stop that. And either that reality is one of the factors that forces the shift to a new paradigm, or it is going to be nuclear war. Because you can't be shooting down these planes. You can't be running this kind of assassination and expect the Iranians not to respond. And when the Iranians respond, you cannot not expect that the U.S. would respond. Okay. In that part of the world, vengeance counts for something. Getting even counts for something. And it's not just a vengeance for the death of Soleimani. It's the vengeance of everything that's happened by the British over the last 100 years before this. It's the vengeance of what has happened since 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq by the U.S., which Trump agrees was the biggest mistake the U.S. ever made. But you can't kill millions of people or cause the death of millions of people and the displacement of dozens of millions of people, and not expect people to want to love you. And a lot of these people in that part of the world are living on the basis that God is going to punish the United States. They're living on the basis of vengeance. Okay, and the U.S. is what goes around comes around. And there was a point where Donald Trump was trying to avoid the consequences of all of this. But at this point, only something outside the system, a new concept, like the Treaty of Westphalia that ended the 30 years war, 140 years of warfare, the 30 years war in Europe, only something like that could change it. And that cannot come from within the region. It has to come from outside the region. In China, Russia, maybe India, and bringing Donald Trump into something that can resolve the situation. So we are at that point where humanity is either going to go into a nuclear conflagration, or there's going to be some fundamental changes. Okay, and I'm sure that people like Pompeo want a nuclear war. People like Esper want a nuclear war. I'm sure most of our generals want a nuclear war. Some of them believe that they could win a nuclear war. I think they're that crazy. I think they're that crazed that they think they can win a nuclear war, and that's what you're looking at. And the British would love it. It would reduce the world's population down to 2 billion or 500 million, and the survivors would have to live in a very backward, feudalistic society. I think they would love that. Not the British people, but the people that run the finance. People know the financial system isn't going to last anyhow, so that's going to go. So why not have a nuclear war to go with it? And that's where the oligarchy is right now, and they're manipulating everything. So this is the year where you either solve these problems or you die. We all die, and that's sobering. And we need some very sober people right now. I don't think we have, half the population out there that supports Trump is screaming, oh, wonderful, he killed a guy. Isn't that great? This shows you what a great, tough guy he is, Little do they know. Little do they even have an inkling as to what was done or what they're dealing with. And that's part of the problem. So that's where we are, folks. That's the reality. And if you are watching this, and I encourage you to go to the LaRouche PAC website, watch a interview with Hussein Askari, who's from Iraq, who has connections in Iraq, and he will give you a pretty good sense of this. But most importantly, Helga Zepp-LaRouche has put out a call for these three nations to get together and have that emergency summit. I don't think anything short of something like that is going to be able to change the locked-in direction that this entire tit-for-tat is now getting underway. And whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's inside the United States, the British have orchestrated the entire thing. And I'm going to be putting out in our next, probably in our next segment, we'll be putting out the actual documentation on that. But they have orchestrated this entire thing. So this is where we at. This is where we've been going to. This is where we have to make a species shift in the way we function as a human race. And this is what's being forced by this situation.
Common stock investments have helped to make our country prosperous and powerful. Owning a share in American industry is like owning a share in the future of our nation. But remember, John Q, there is a risk as well as an advantage in owning any kind of property. So get the facts before you put your money to work.